Raise your hand if you have ever gone to school. Thank you. Raise your hand if you've gone to school and you had an extraordinary teacher, a teacher that made you feel as if you could do anything. Thank you very much. Now raise your hand if you had a teacher who tried to rob you of confidence, made you wonder if you could do anything, led you to think that maybe you were going to be a failure. Thank you very much. Tomorrow morning, the sun will rise, and many students will jump out of their beds into their shoes. They'll be so excited to go to school. Other students will hover under the covers for a while. They don't want to go to school, because when they go to school, they hear words like, "Why did you even bother to come today? You're not going to pass." Or, "You're just like your brother. You're never going to amount to anything." Or, "Go away. You're not worth my time." The worst bullies in the classroom are teachers, and we don't talk about it, but we need to start. I want to take you into a second grade classroom that I was able to visit about a year ago actually. And I walked into the classroom, and right when I walked into the door, to the right was a little boy facing the wall. And he was looking up at a sign that was about this big by this big, and it said, "I will learn to behave." I could tell he'd been crying. I was there to supervise a school counseling intern who was going to do a guidance lesson that morning. So I walked in and began to watch what was going on, and my school counseling intern put the kids in a circle. They all began to listen to the counselor, and the little boy got up to go sit with the group. And as soon as he sat down, his teacher raced over to him, grabbed him up by the collar, and marched him right back over to the desk and said, "No, you didn't earn that privilege today. Put your head down." I was very concerned about that little boy, particularly, ironically, because the lesson that day was about the importance of never leaving a friend out. After the class was over, I walked into the hallway and talked to my intern and said, "Tell me about that little boy." And he said, "Well, Dr. Metcalf, he's been acting up for the past 6 months, mostly because 6 months ago he watched his 2 older brothers be murdered at his home." I said, "Oh my gosh, did the teacher know about that?" And he said, "Yes." And she talks to him like that every day. As appalling as this is, everyone, this happens across our country and across the world every single day. Teacher bullying is real, but we don't talk about it. It's as if there's a missing skill in teachers such as the one I've just described, only knowing one thing, and that is to control, and shame to get kids to behave. But it's not working anymore, and we don't talk about it. But Dr. Alan McAvoy from Northern Michigan University, who is a sociologist, is talking about it, and he's writing about it. And in an article entitled "Abuse of Power" that he published in 2014, he writes the following: "In a small minority," and minority is an important word here, "of teachers, an ugly undercurrent of mean-spirited and disdainful conduct towards students exists. This conduct constitutes a corruption of the role of educator and does enormous damage to students, colleagues, and the public's faith in schools." And one more. "When students are targeted by teachers, they often feel shamed and powerless. Many of them struggle to make any kind of relationships because other people target them too." So what does this mean? Well, it means we need a new skill. And I'm going to share that new skill with you in a little bit. But first, I'm going to take you back in time. I'll take you back in time to 1957 and how I came to know this skill that is the one I will share with you. I'm in first grade, and my teacher is very cruel. And so I am scared every morning when I go to school. And I have a stomach ache. My dad takes me to school every morning, and one morning I'm still not happy. I'm still complaining of a stomach ache, and he says, "Linda, it's okay. You'll be all right when you get in there." So I try to go in there, and as soon as I do, my dad tells the teacher, "Linda's not feeling well again today. Just watch her, would you?" And the teacher nods, closes the door. And then the teacher walks me up in front of my classroom. Now, in my classroom, there were 90 students. One classroom, 90 students, one teacher. She walks me up in front of the classroom in front of my 89 schoolmates and shakes me so hard that I start crying. And then she whispers in my ear, "Do that again, Linda, and be late, and I'll shake you like this every single time." Well, it wasn't late after that very much, but school year went on. A few years later, same school, 8th grade, I'm working on an art project. I work on it all weekend. I really like the art project. My parents watch me do it. Monday morning, I take in the art project to submit it to an art contest. I lay it up on the desk for the teacher to take in for a submission for the test, for the art project. And the teacher looks at this and said, "You didn't do this. You cheated." My mother is standing right next to me. She's going, "No, we watched Linda do this all weekend." "Oh, you're lying for your daughter. Shame on you. Awful." They didn't take my project. Somehow I got through school, mostly ignoring a lot of the stuff I heard. So what does a person do who listens to things like this from teachers that she does not like? Well, she becomes one. And I became a teacher in 1974. And I'm graduating from Baylor University with an education degree, and I'm driving a 1966 baby blue Mustang to a teacher interview. Great car. And I walk in, and the superintendent gives me an interview, and he likes what I have to teach. I'm going to be teaching art and earth science education. And he offers me a job. He's going to be paying me $6,000 a year. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. We're going to be rich. But before I leave the room, he stops me and he says, "Wait a minute before you leave. You look too young. When you walk in those classrooms next fall, you better walk in and carry a heavy stick and do not smile until Christmas." I thought, okay, I don't remember that class that I took in education courses, but hey, he's a superintendent. He just gave me $6,000 a year. I'll do it. And so I did it. And I had a very tough year. I would leave every day thinking, I'm a bully. I'm not being the teacher I want to be. I referred kids constantly because they wouldn't listen to me. And over the summer, I thought, okay, I got two choices. I can change professions, or I can go back and be the teacher that I want to be. And I did that one. And I went back and I had 8 incredible years as a middle school teacher teaching art and earth science. My art class eventually became the in-school suspension class. If you don't know what an in-school suspension class is today, it's a classroom where students who misbehave in schools go sit for a day, kind of keep them contained, and hopefully they'll learn their lesson. Usually they don't. But back in 1974, they didn't have that. They had my art classroom. So I had 40, 45 students in an art classroom. And we had fun. It was very messy, but we had a great time. 1998 comes along. I now have a school counseling certificate and a PhD in marriage and family therapy. And I'm going back into public schools because I love being in public schools, particularly a public high school. This time I'm lucky. I'm getting to go to the high school where 2 of my children are attending, who at first said, "Oh, Mom, that is so weird." But later it was okay because if they needed anything, I was there. And I had a great time there, but it was a time of restlessness in high schools. Kids were restless. Teachers would bring kids to me and say, "Linda, keep her. I don't want her in my class anymore," in front of the kids. Kids would come to me and say, "Dr. Metcalf, what do I do? My teacher hates me." There was a zero tolerance policy that was being adhered to so strictly, everybody was afraid to move. Expulsions were going up, suspensions were going up. And then in 1999, Columbine happens. In the 394 school shootings that have happened since Columbine, every single time I wonder in horror, did those kids who walked into the school to shoot other people hear harsh words too that might have disengaged them from the school community and pushed them into the arms of people that only know violence is an answer? I wondered, and I wondered. The government, the US Government Acknowledgement Office, did a study on school shooters, kindergarten through 12, in 2020, 58-page document, great document. They talk about all the risk factors, all the things that can cause a kid to go down the road of school shootings. But they also did something else. They came up with something called protective factors. Here's one of them. Stable connections to school and school personnel. Feelings of connectedness to prosocial, nonviolent peers. What's that mean? That means engaging them. Instead of ignoring the kid in the hoodie in the back of the room who doesn't speak, or seeing the kid who walks in with that attitude and throwing them out of class. It's about connecting them. We don't do that very much. Instead, we decide to require clear backpacks, better locks, more police officers, barbed wire fences, bulletproof windows. But we don't talk about the conversations in the classroom. But we need to start. I'm going to share with you a skill in a little bit. And I can't promise that this skill will solve everything. But I can guarantee you one thing. For every student who became a school shooter, there were adults who lacked the skill to reach that student. And as a result, let him down and the entire school community down in a disastrous way. The school is called a solution-focused skill. It's actually modeled after a counseling model, and it helps teachers to basically look beyond the problem, look beyond the behavior, look beyond the attitude, look beyond the disrespect, and possibly there's somebody else inside that they could tap into and get to know. That's what the skill does. Just to illustrate this, I'm going to share a story with you. This is the story of Jose. He was a middle school student, and he was being taught by a student teacher that I had been sharing the solution-focused approach with. So Jose walks in one day, coming back from alternative school, and he's all ready to go to misbehave, and he does misbehave, and he walks into the class of my teacher, Mr. Crosby, who's a drama teacher, sits down and begins to act up. And Mr. Crosby eventually tries everything he can to get Jose back on track, but he can't. And so he gives him a discipline pass, and he says, Jose, go down to the office and get the discipline pass signed, please. And Jose stands up, bows to the class claps, middle school kids. He goes off, comes back 10 minutes later with the discipline pass in his mouth, chewed up, walks up to the teacher who's standing in the middle of the class and spits it right on the teacher's shoe. Now think for a moment what your average teacher would respond to that kind of situation. But Mr. Crosby was going to try something else. He looks down and he says, Jose, I can't read that very well. Can you either smooth it out for me or go get me another pass? So Jose's kind of stunned, and he gets another pass, and he walks back down to the office, gets it signed, comes back in, thankfully sits it on the table, and Mr. Crosby says, thank you, Jose, have a seat. Rest of the class period, Mr. Crosby's walking around looking at other students, and he walks by Jose, who's drawing. He said, my gosh, where'd you learn to draw like that? We're going to be doing set design in 2 weeks. You would be amazing on our set design team. And Jose looks up and I'm like, what is this? The next morning, he comes in. Jose walks into the classroom and Mr. Crosby's getting ready for a meeting. And he walks in and he says, hey, Mr. Crosby, hey, dude, listen. Sorry about yesterday. And they shook hands. And Mr. Crosby said, thanks, Jose. Let's talk set design. The next few weeks, Jose gets involved in set design and a few other school projects. His grades start going up. No more alternative school referrals. No more referrals. 6 months go by. He's a great student. I asked Mr. Crosby one day, how did you do that? It was incredible. He said, you have to find something good in every kid. Here's another story. Tyler was one of my students as a counselor who was truant constantly. One day he was there at school, so I grabbed him quickly because I had to work with him on a schedule for spring. Walked in, I said, hey, tell me, what can we talk about that would be helpful to you? It's called the best hopes question. What are your best hopes for us talking? And he said, I just got to find a way to stay here this semester, then I'm dropping out. Okay, go stay here this semester. He said, just find a way to make me, find a way for me to come to school or want to come to school, and I'll try. I said, cool, let's do that. So I asked him something called the miracle question. Suppose tonight you go home, Tyler, you wake up tomorrow morning, and you don't mind coming to school. What would be going on that would tell you you didn't mind? He said, I'd have more teachers like my first block teacher. That's the only class I'm passing. And I looked at his grades, and sure enough, he was taking 4 classes and only passing 1. I wasn't worried about the 3 he was failing. I wanted to know what's going on in that one. And he said, I'll tell you what goes on in that class. I walk in that class, and you know what she does? Every day she says, I'm glad you're here. I don't get that from anybody else. I said, okay, then I'm going to put together some teachers for you for the spring that I know will be happy to greet you each day. Is that okay? Yeah. In other words, he helped me build that schedule. I listened to him. All I asked was that he showed up in my office the first day of January so I could introduce him to these new teachers, because kids like him had reputations. Send him back to a new group of teachers who'd heard about him, not such a good idea. I wanted them to meet who I saw. He graduated from high school a year later. He made up all the courses he had failed. He had graduated with a 3.5 GPA and an award in creative writing. And I went to his graduation. How can I not do that? And I asked him, tell me, what can I tell other teachers? Tell me what happened to you, what helped you. He said, tell them this, Dr. Metcalf. Tell teachers, tell them to care that the kid is in their classroom. Some kids never get anybody to care. Tell them to build relationships with their students. And let them know how much they mean to students, even when the students don't show them. 4 years later, he graduated from college. We kept in touch. And after that, he went off to Texas Tech University to work on a master's degree in counseling. You never know the power of words, that extra touch. Tomorrow, the sun will rise, and we're going to see an eclipse. Pretty cool, huh? It's going to be an amazing experience. We're going to see the sun like we've never seen it before. We're going to see the sun's corona, because the moon will line up perfectly between the sun and the earth. And I'm showing this to you because I want us to think that every day kids walk in with similar coronas. We just don't see them. My hope is that by listening to my talk, we will begin to look beyond the problems they bring in and see that every student has the right to jump up every morning out of their bed and jump into their shoes and go to school. And that the worst bullies in the classroom can become, in my words, miracle workers by using that skill. Thank you for listening to me, and may the solution force be with all of you. Thank you very much.